Welcome back, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yariv. Wolok, my partner in crime, as always, Vasili Gianarakos. Vasili, what's going on, brother?
Doing really good, Yariv. Obviously, Four Nations tournament ended. Really good final there for
For
Canada
you.
and the US. Yeah, for you. I guess for me in Canada,
I was
everybody in the
joking.
US
It was a great game. I'm
unfortunately
joking.
had to experience the L. But really good hockey. And even if Canada lost, I'm just excited to see like international hockey back and watch best on best again, because how long has it really been? Then obviously Flyers come back to get a pretty big win against the Oilers on a 2-game win streak. So some stuff to break down, and good to finally see Jacob Peltier get in the lineup.
Yeah. Yeah, we got a pretty packed show, actually. Got a good amount of stuff to talk about, but it was a great tournament. We're going to talk about it in the second half of the show, but it was a humongous success for the NHL.
Yeah, growing the game, right? Like that's the
Yeah.
main thing. I think I saw a stat like over 9 million people watched the final game on ESPN Plus or on ESPN, I mean, and think about like, okay, you have that 9 million, but what about all the people that illegally streamed it? So you probably had almost 15 million people probably watching hockey. And I think
Yeah.
that blew like the last 4 or 5 Stanley Cup ratings out of the water. So
Yeah. I talked to people who like don't even watch hockey that watched it. So
there you go. That
that
mission accomplished, right?
that and yeah. Oh, we're gonna get into it actually. Yeah. I'm like ready to talk about it, but okay, let's do the usual spiel before we get started, and then we'll get right into the topic. So just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe, hit the notification bell for notifications to get notified of when we release our episodes, because they come out at various times in the beginning of the week, and we apologize for that. Also, for the audio version, go to Spotify and iTunes and give us a follow and a rating there as well. That is the best way to support our podcast. So if you are listening right now, you have not done those things, please do them. Again, we are tremendously grateful for all the support. But if you are not subscribed, we pretty much don't know you exist. No, I'm kidding. But it's just the best way to support us. So please do that. Also, shout out to our sponsors, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim's. They have one of the best, if not the best, cheesesteak in Philadelphia. It's freezing cold. Well, it's actually coming out of being freezing cold, so it's a little bit nicer. So it's a little easier to wait outside in a line for Jim Steak. So make sure to go check out Jim Steaks at 4th and South and get yourself an awesome cheesesteak, delicious cheesesteak. Also, shout out to Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Go to them for your insurance adjustment needs. They will help facilitate the process between you and your insurance company. They will make sure that you get the best claim possible, and they will handle all of the headaches that come with dealing with insurance companies. Again, Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. And I also want to give a brief shout out to our partners, SportsSpider.com. Guys, if you're tired of searching multiple websites for sports news, SportsSpider.com has you covered. They collect the latest articles, videos, and podcasts from around the web and organize them by your favorite teams. If you want to stay as up to date as possible on our Philadelphia Flyers or the NHL in general, hit the link in the description to check out sportspider.com. Again, the link is in the description. They are our partners. Our stuff is pinned at the top. Make sure to check them out. Okay. So I don't know if this is Flyers news, but the Flyers are coming off of a recent 6-3 victory against the defending Stanley Cup competitor. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but
Stanley Cup finalists. There you go.
Finalists, thank you. That's the right way to say it. Stanley Cup finalists, the Edmonton Oilers. They played maybe their best game of the season. At least it's up there. It's got to be in the top 5 best games of the season. They were dealing with, I don't want to say a depleted roster by anything like that, but obviously McDavid was probably exhausted. The Flyers also had Sanheim and TK, who were playing quite a bit. Draisaitl obviously was not in the tournament because his country was not represented. But McDavid wasn't at a full force 100%. I'm sure him and Konechny and Sanheim were all celebrating the victory, being part of Team Canada. So the Flyers took advantage of it. I mean, they came out. The game was pretty even to a lot of to a lot of respect. And then in the second period, where Edmonton is at their best and the Flyers are at their worst, seemed to be where the Flyers kind of jumped in and took over the game. They really limited all of Edmonton's offense at that point. They heavily outshot Edmonton in that game. Ersson did not have to stand on his head at all. He actually gave up 3 goals. He didn't have the best save percentage, though I wouldn't really blame them on Ersson. But it seemed like at one point Edmonton was going to kind of come back into the game again. They took an early lead in the game, so it was kind of up and down for, let's say, the first like 40% of the game. And then after that, the Flyers kind of just completely shut everything down. And obviously, the big highlight of that game, and we'll go line by line performances of that game, but obviously the Michkov, Couturier, and Tippett line highlighting that big game. So, what do you think about the game itself? And then we'll get into the Michkov line, and we'll go subsequently through the other forward lines.
Yeah, I wasn't really sure how it was going to go coming out of the break,
Right.
especially against a powerhouse like Edmonton. That kind of scares you a little bit, right? To be honest, because the Flyers are a team that can let, a lot of goals against, albeit they've been a lot better defensively, the last few months. But we saw at the beginning of the season, coming out of not really playing too well in their defensive zone. So, after a long break, you never know how that's going to go in terms of D zone coverages, stuff like that. So, I thought they held their own really well. In terms of just the way the game went, like they came out kind of guns a blazing. I believe the shots were 6-1 to start in the first 8 or 9 minutes of the game, and then from that point, Edmonton kind of reclaimed a little bit of momentum, did turn things around, tie things up in that first period. And then they do take the lead as well off Draisaitl's goal. So at that point, you're heading into the second, wondering, okay, can the Flyers bounce back here? And they do with the huge second period, 4 goals to Edmonton's 1. They really take control. Mainly, it's that Michkov, Couturier, Tippett line, kind of as you stated, Yariv. All 3 of those guys are +5. Crazy enough, for that game. So it's pretty nuts to see that. Second 3-point game of Matvei Michkov's career. So the Flyers were obviously able to take advantage just of some of the defensive breakdowns in terms of Edmonton's play. Like there's a lot of turnovers for Edmonton. One play that really sticks out to me specifically in that game has to be a play with Couturier. 1 second here. Sorry. Yeah, but anyway, Couturier, essentially he, breaks up a play in the neutral zone with the poke check, springs Michkov the other way. Michkov's able to find Tippett. What a defensive play from him. Also another play that stuck out to me too was Michkov's no look pass kind of across the seam to Sean Couturier as well. So that line in general really, really kind of stood out in that game, pretty obvious. And I would say too, for Michkov and Couturier, they kind of showed chemistry even before the break and had, a couple of good games. And I think at this point, it seems like that's probably the best suited center in this lineup for Michkov to play with is Sean Couturier. And it's kind of been showing the last little bit. So.
Yeah, that line. Well, we kind of saw it. They had a huge game when it was TK, Coots, and Michkov together, where they each had like a 5-point night or something. I can't even remember. I think it was TK and Coots had 5 points, and then Michkov had like 3 or 4 points in that game. I can't remember. It was another big performance. But yeah, you're right. There has been chemistry between Coots and Michkov. He's kind of the only, and this is what I said. We both talked about this in the preseason. Is like that Couturier is really the only guy who thinks the game, at least from a center position, that thinks the game at the level that Michkov does. So it's kind of really the only fit that can work, especially now looking at the centers with Paling, Cates, and Lawton. There's really no ideal center at this point unless Coots was like in his prime.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so
And
it's
what
like
this proves to me too, Yariv, I would say, like you see Michkov come out of this break. It's pretty evident to me that the way like he was playing earlier in the season, going through a little bit of, stretches where he was struggling, I feel like it's a lot of it's conditioning related, right? Because you see him come out of this break, get that time off, and he's kind of all guns a blazing, looks really, really good. So I think it's a good sign, obviously, just for his potential to, win a Calder trophy here and be in that race and really finish strong and kind of get himself back in the mix. Not to say that he would ever really fell out of it, but, he was having a little bit of struggles compared to some of the other rookies like Hudson and Celebrini. So I think it just once again shows that Obviously wasn't used to playing that amount of games. Getting that break shows that, once he does have that energy level, once he's able to kind of recharge those batteries, you see that skill come out again. Just making so many plays all over the ice, right? Like I don't want to make it the Michkov only show, but he was really the standout in that game. Like just making setups for his teammates, kind of left, right, and center. There was even one play that stood out to me too, where he was going into the zone. He had the ability to pass it to the net potentially, but he's waiting for Sanheim as the trailer, and he's just sitting there waiting, waiting, waiting. And then Sanheim comes in, gets a nice shot off, almost ends up being a goal. But like just that patience, that vision to hold on to that puck, you don't see 20-year-old kids typically do that.
Yeah.
So just
Yeah.
what vision, right?
Yeah, and it is remnant to what Tortorella has been saying, right? And like Tortorella says a lot of stuff that annoys people, but he's like so rarely wrong. He was talking about conditioning, and we saw that even in preseason with Michkov and how he didn't like excel like Luchenko did in the drills early on, like all the skating drills. So it's obviously something he needs to work on. But we did talk about it right before the break that we kind of expected Michkov to take this break and then come out firing, and we saw the Michkov that was a point per game player the other night. And again, I agree with everything you said, but I don't think we should forget how well Tippett looked, who also had considerable time off. Like he created that goal by himself, right? And this is why I don't love Tippett with TK, because like Tippett like just creates his own offense. Like he just drives up the ice, up the wing, and fires a puck like that. You know what I mean? Like he almost like he'd be great with like a speedy center. That's why I liked him with Frost, right? But it's like he really is the type of guy that like you just need to keep up with Tippett, because he's just gonna be firing the puck from everywhere.
Yeah, agreed.
And he really looked that way. And I thought that line, and it's funny because they did not play a lot of ice time. I think Tippett had like just under 12 minutes.
I believe the whole line was like around under 13 or something like that.
Yeah,
like 11 minutes, 5-on-5.
Michkov had 14 and a half. Coots had like 13 minutes. Like he wasn't playing them that much, but I think mostly it was because of the matchups. And we'll talk about like Cates, and how well, how good of a job they were doing shutting down the opposition.
Yeah, shutting
those
down
guys,
David, right?
well, those guys produced as soon as they were out there. So they had no like extended shifts. Like you said, like Michkov was setting people up left and right. He had that 2-on-1 where he didn't end up scoring, but he had a good chance on net. He could have had a lot more than 3 points in that game. Like
he could have had 5 points for sure, I would say. Like especially that play with Sanheim hitting him like the trailer there could have easily been a goal. I mean, Tippett himself too had 6 shots on net and only 2 goals, and he had a couple other grade A chances that Michkov set him up for. So there was potential for even more goals, but I think it's pretty impressive, obviously, to come out of the break and beat a team like the Oilers, who are supposed to be competing for a cup again. I mean, I'm sure the Oilers are kind of looking at themselves, wondering what happened after this week, and they lose 6-3 to the Flyers and 7-3 to the Capitals. Game after, they need a real reset for sure after this weekend.
Capitals put up like, what was it, 15 goals in 2 games?
Yeah, they scored 8 goals as well the on the Sunday too against the Rangers, right?
Yeah, and Ovi had 2 goals.
Or not the Rangers, but whoever they played. Yeah,
Pittsburgh Penguins. It was Penguins and then Oilers.
That's who it was. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it was. I do want to talk about the Capitals a little bit later when we talk about special teams. But when you look at that line's performance, like hopefully that these combinations are working now with Kuzmenko here and allowing him to play the left side with TK. Let's get into that line too. Like I don't think that line necessarily was like incredible or anything, but it fits. Right, like Kuzmenko is a playmaker. He obviously had his first goal. He's got 2 points in 2 games for the Flyers. Like he's doing what he does, right? Where he comes to a new team and he produces at a point per game pace, half a goal a game pace, right? He's doing that in the 2 game sample size. But it does allow the Flyers to kind of balance the lines out a little bit more, where like Farabee was struggling tremendously, still is. Offensively is 1 goal in 6 games for Calgary, where like Frost's got 3 points. I think he's got 2 goals and 1 assist in 6 games.
He's having a little bit more success on the offensive side for them.
Right. So, Kuzmenko is like kind of a spark now for Konechny, who like, again, they had him and Tippett playing together. I didn't think that there was much chemistry there, but I understood why he was doing it. He's kind of like, those are my two big guns, as far as like from a veteran presence, and I'm putting them out there together and like try to find different centers, and obviously the Scott Lawton and Konechny, there's clearly a thing there. They almost had a shorty also. TK and Lawton, they already work like on
They've
the
had
on the fast,
chemistry.
yeah, on the fast break, like it works. Like Lawton is not a setup man, but he can keep up with TK in certain scenarios where it does excel offensively. But I thought they looked okay. We'll see if they can build some chemistry as they move forward because quite frankly, like Konechny needs somebody to play off of because again, Tippett is not that guy. Like he's a really good player, but he's not like necessarily a player you play off of. He's like a pure finisher. He's kind of like maybe like a Simone Gagne type of finisher, right? Who was just like a pure shooter. Like this guy's just coming out there, he's firing the puck. Where TK does a little bit of everything, but he's also a goal scorer. He's like more like Michkov is kind of like that, right? He's like the 50 goal scorer, 70 assist guy, Michkov, like, right? Like that's the type of player he is. So it's like you need a guy who's kind of more in that vein. And even though Kuzmenko is more of a goal scoring type, here we need him to not just be a shooter, we need him to be like kind of a playmaker. And he set up his own goal on the power play, right? Like it was like a give and go redirect, right? Like
Yeah, it was a nice play.
right. So I think the second line could work
Yeah, I mean, I think that combination
temporarily.
of Lawton, Kuzmenko, Konechny makes sense. Like you have Konechny, who's your most talented player. You could arguably say that Kuzmenko at this point might be the next most talented player, just in terms of like the ability to score at this point at the NHL level. Obviously, Michkov's going to be your close third. He might even surpass him next season. Who knows at this point?
I think he's better now, but
Yeah, it's possible. But I'm just saying, like, based on guys, okay, who scored 30 and 40
history,
goals.
sure.
Yeah, right. Like, because Menko has that record of being able to score 30 before in the NHL. So why not put him and Konechny together and kind of see what they can do and see if it equates to any offense? And I mean, so far at 5-on-5, I don't think they look bad at all. Like, they got a lot of usage, right? Like, because Menko played 17 minutes, 21 seconds, Konechny 19:05, Lawton 18:37. So they were getting some ice time out there. I thought it was interesting, too, what Tortorella mentioned about Kuzmenko in the presser afterwards. He stated that there was a couple corrections he made with Kuzmenko in terms of coverages, and that the next time a similar play occurred, he made the corrections on the ice immediately. So he mentioned that was encouraging for him just to see how coachable Kuzmenko is. I thought that is really interesting of him to mention that. So it's obviously nice to see that you have a coach like Torts who people thought maybe these two might clash.
Always.
Exactly.
Always. Yeah.
But you see that even though, there could be certain things that clash in the way that Kuzmenko plays and the way Torch coaches, he calls him out right away and he responds in a positive way, right? So
I think to that point, Kuzmenko knows his reputation at this point, right?
yeah, like of course, he wants to make and kind of prove to people that, hey, this isn't it. This is false. I can be a good teammate. I can kind of get a part of the program and align with what the coaches are looking for.
I think he's a good teammate. It's am I going to buy into the system, right? Because he's probably always been a guy, and this is my assumption, I don't really know, who's been like, well, I'm just talented, so I'll just go.
Very energetic and
especially in the KHL, like, he was probably like eventually just the guy where like they let him go out there and just drive the offense, right? He was one of the best offensive players in that league, and then he came to Vancouver and he was just scoring goals, right? He's playing top line, he's just scoring goals every night, right? He never really had that like gut check moment. This might be it for him, where he's kind of like, if I want to stay in the NHL, like
I need to do this. Yeah.
Yes.
I need to conform kind of to what Torts wants me to do in my defensive zone when necessary. I need to kind of align with the system. I also figure too that, having Michkov there, I'm assuming is a motivator for him because you'd imagine they're friends. He probably wants to stay in Philly and potentially play with Michkov for more than just this 20-game stretch. So he probably realizes, hey, if I want to stick around here and earn a contract, I kind of need to, show that I'm able to do what the coach is expecting of me. So overall, I think that line played really well. I thought Konechny, Kuzmenko looked pretty good on the power play. The chemistry looked good. Lawton was with them on the power play too, which is something to note. We can talk about that later, but just Lawton and Ristolainen being on that first power play unit, it's a little bit interesting if you ask me, in terms of the setup and why they might be there. So we can mention that.
I mean, the power play is so bad at this point. It's like I'm out of complaints.
But hey, boost the trade value, right, of those guys a little bit potentially.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought Kuzmenko Konechny looked really good on the power play. Kind of excited to see what they can do when they develop more chemistry. You add Michkov in the mix there. I think maybe they can make the power play look like somewhat of an offensive threat. Hopefully, this last 20 games. But we'll see.
We'll see. I have a segment for us to talk about special teams, but so we can get into that like deeper. But yeah, no, I thought Kuzmenko has been promising so far, and I kind of expected this, to be honest with you.
I got an interesting quote actually as well, just to mention on Kuzmenko. This is from Torts' presser today. This kind of gives you a idea into where the organization sees him right now. Like we both stated when they traded for him, this is really a tryout period for him, right? Like if he impresses, who knows if he gets that 1-year deal or they extend him. This is what Torts had to say about him after today's practice. He stated, it's not a long-term deal. Kuzmenko knows that. We know that. So it's a bit of an audition. What are you? Can you help us? Do you want to help us? You're going to show us if you want to help us by attitude and how we play, and we'll make a decision from there. So that kind of almost cements what we were saying, right? Like he knows, Kuzmenko himself, this is a audition for this coaching staff. The coaching staff also knows that. So let's kind of see, what he has and see if he's a good fit, right? So I think first 2 games, pretty good impression that he's made. We'll see if he can continue it beyond, right?
Yeah, for sure. Also, breaking news here. Elliot Friedman just tweeted. This is not a big piece of news, but it sounds like Anaheim is acquiring Ville Husso from Detroit for future considerations.
Interesting.
Some extra depth.
Maybe Detroit is trying to free up some salary to make a move or something.
Yeah, they should be making a move, to be honest with you.
Well, how long have they been under the Yzer plan?
Right, exactly. So yeah, the other line, the Forrester Cates Brink line, they're responsible, I guess, for shutting down McDavid in this particular game. Yeah, I think it's just more of the same from them. We know they work already. Will they be like a long-term thing? Like, are they the starting third line next year, with Luchenko, most likely coming up? And again, we don't really know what's going to happen with this team in the offseason. I still expect more changes, and maybe Scott Lawton's not going to be around here, and it's going to be Luchenko playing with Konechny, who we don't really know right now. I would find that weird, to be honest with you, but yeah, I think there's just more of the same from them. I don't like that people list them as the top line, not because I don't acknowledge the minutes played and how well that they played, especially in that stretch where they were like scoring every night. It's just like if you look at their production throughout the entire year, they are not the top line on this team.
Really good third line, really
right.
Good third line.
They are used like a third line, like a shutdown. We don't have a first line. We don't have a first line that plays against.
I would arguably say you could say that like Couturier, Lawton line is like a 1A, 1B, whichever line might be playing better on any given night. It's going to be your first line
because they're your offensive production line.
Yeah, your best offensive players. Exactly.
That's where you have 3. I guess your 4 top 6 wingers in there. Noah Cates is maybe the element where maybe he ends up moving around, especially if like Lawton gets traded. But most likely Ryan Poehling will get called up. But again, more of the same from there. The fourth line. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say they played well. Like they had a lot of minutes. Brink 1635, Cates 1639, Forster 1735, and only a -1. And I mean, to only be a -1 matching up against McDavid, that's basically like a win, right? That's pretty solid performance.
Especially when they didn't produce really in this game. So it's like, they weren't noticeably a problem at any point in this game, right? So they're a big reason why the Flyers were able to shut down the opposition.
They neutralized those offensive players for Edmonton pretty well. So that's what you want to see.
Limited the shots, that's for sure.
I will say too, I saw the lines listed at practice from Charlie O'Connor today, so shout out to him. And everything's all the same as what we are going through here. They had the Couturier line as number 1, Forster as number 2. Kuzmenko, Lawton, Konechny is the third line, which is just weird to have listed like that. To your point, right?
But
like it doesn't make.
That's why I don't take any of the listings like seriously. And Tortorella keeps alluding to that. He's like, we don't have a first line. He's like, I just use lines as they're playing well, and I think he's right. Like we're not structured that way. Typically, you identify your first line by your center, right? And Couturier, while he is fourth on the team in points, right? He hasn't played like incredible. Like Lawton's 1 point behind him with 27 points. So it's just like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. And Case was like cold in the beginning. He's got 22 points now, but he was on fire for a while. So it's just like,
Yeah.
we don't know. Everything's like interchangeable.
Arguably, I mean, especially for Couturier, you want to see him just get to that 50-point mark. I mean, I don't know about this season, but I'm just saying going ahead, you with his contract, you want him to be producing 50
Yeah,
points potentially
100%.
or over. So
100%. And so the fourth line, the Peltier, Paling, and Hathaway line, I don't think they were that noticeable in this game. I think Paling looked really rusty,
yeah.
expectedly so. Peltier hasn't played a month. I don't think it was a great way to gauge them. They weren't a negative in any way, which was good. Hathaway was still stirring stuff up, but I'm interested to see how this line develops. And again, maybe Paling ends up swapping with Lawton at some point. That's possible too. We've seen that in the past, especially as Paling kind of works his way back in the lineup. So many of these guys were out of this
Yeah.
lineup that I was actually kind of surprised how well it came together for this game, right? Because like there was several guys who were coming off the IR coming into this game and haven't played
Oh yeah.
for,
I
significant amount of
guess
time.
I guess the benefit in that, because I totally see your point. I guess the benefit is you had a bunch of, on the other side, you had a bunch of Oilers going through the same thing, other than like your McDavid and
Who was it? It was Ekholm,
Ekholm and McDavid, I believe. I don't know if there's
McDavid.
anybody else.
Yeah, but they might have had injuries too. I'm not like that in tune
Yeah,
with their lineup also.
not too sure, but it is good to see, all players that were injured return after the break. That would have been a pretty bad sign to have 2 weeks off and then, Tippett still be out or Zamula still be out or Ristolainen still be out, for example. So it's good to see the team get healthy. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens like with that fourth line. Like to your point, I didn't really notice Peltier too much. I was looking out for him specifically because I just wanted to see, okay, what is he going to bring? He hasn't played in a long time. Paling hasn't played in a long time. Brand new teammates, brand new system. You can't really expect too much out of him in that situation, I would say. So I think it'll be more something to watch, right? Like in the coming weeks, how does Peltier look is going to be the bigger question versus obviously just the one game,
Hmm.
kind of getting things under him. But I wonder too if like they end up moving him up a little bit in the lineup because I don't know if they acquired him to really just be a fourth liner here. So
How's he going to move up?
that's a good point. Like, but the trade deadline's coming up, so maybe
Right.
somebody gets moved,
But
and that's kind of when he gets the
but
opportunity. But
even then, it's like maybe Kuzmenko, which unless the return is really good, I don't think they're going to move Kuzmenko. Like I don't think they're going to move
yeah,
him for a third round pick or something,
it has to be
unless
a
he.
second or higher.
Right, like they want to take a look at the guy, right? It was somebody
I would keep him, in my opinion. I don't think they should move him, even if I would keep him unless you get like a high second round pick or something. I think the benefits are could be really good. Like I just think having a guy like him to be with Michkov in his first initial seasons is a really positive
it
thing to do.
it also
So
depends what year the pick is. Like if it's a second round pick next year, even if it's not high, because they're not going to get a high pick because he's going to be a rental for a Stanley Cup contender, right? So it's
yeah,
like
exactly.
realistically, like the best they can probably get is like a late second round pick for him, but he has to perform too. It can't just be off of what he did. He has to like be on fire in a team, and they probably would have to eat 50% of his contract for the rest of the year too. So it would be like, it would be like him in combination of like continuing to do what he's doing. Where Peltier, I don't know, like I think they're gonna re-sign him on a bridge anyway. I think they're gonna give him a short-term deal. The very least, he's a very good AHL guy, which I think he's more than that. But I think we're gonna have to wait and see with him, and I think they're gonna take that approach with Peltier too. It's like, they're not gonna decide on the guy who's an RFA and 23 years old in 20 games. They're
Yeah,
gonna
that's what
they're
I'm
gonna give him
saying,
a
right?
year, right?
Exactly, and maybe give him some time to actually like have a defined role because I just think the way the roster's built with all the wingers right now, it's a little bit hard to kind of see, okay, where does he exactly fit? And maybe next year they're kind of penciling him in to be that checking winger on the third line when they open up some slots and do some
I
rearranging, right?
I still don't know what that's gonna be. Like, there's
But
only one spot open.
something's gonna have to happen, I think. I just think there's such an abundance of wingers on this team. It only
Yes.
makes sense to convert some of that into a center if possible. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that doesn't include anything they might do in UFA. Like they
yeah.
still might bring guys in on a 1 year deal or something like that. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. I think the draft is going to tell us a lot how they draft, and what kind of moves they make in the offseason.
Oh, of course.
Like leading into free agency will probably because I wouldn't be shocked if he's traded too. Like I don't think it's likely, but I wouldn't be like, if they like move Jacob Peltier again, I wouldn't be like, oh, like what a shocker. But I do think they grabbed him because they like what he brings. I also think his game is not perfect for fourth line role, but like you said, he's like a third line guy,
Ideally.
realistically on this team. So it's like, we have like kind of this interchangeable lineup. So it's interesting to see how he does with the combination of guys he's going to play. I think he's kind of playing for his look in the offseason and how they can pencil him into next year. I think they're gonna want to re-sign him on a 1 year deal, maybe
Yeah.
a 2 year deal. But it'll be pretty minimal money, but like $1 million salary.
Oh yeah, it's going to be no risk in terms of the money, really, really minimal, like you said. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Like you said, they could flip him potentially. If they do, I mean, I would say it's probably because he's like a throw-in in a deal or something like
Right.
that, where another team really likes him. Like he's cost-controlled RFA. Sure, you like him. Okay, if we need to do this to kind of put it over the top, then we'll throw him in because ultimately, if you're, having a winger in your own system kind of come up and take that spot, or having Pelty eventually take that spot, I think for the Flyers, it doesn't make the biggest difference, right?
Yeah.
So,
But I also think it's probably worth the gamble. Like I think about somebody like Ryan Hartman, who we gave up on too quickly, right? And it's like
you could use a guy like that right now
yeah,
on
and
this lineup.
Hartman's a little bit different because he had a great rookie year, so the potential was like kind of evident to begin with. But like the game's not that different, right? It's like a slightly undersized physical winger. They in Hartman's case, he got converted to like a part-time center as well. So like I don't know, maybe Jacob. Like I brought up the fact that Jacob Peltier has played center. I don't know if they're, I don't think they're trying to use him as that, but they might be like, nah, it's worth it for us just to see how he develops, right? Like he's really good at the AHL level. Like he was putting up points in the AHL level like Tippett was, right? At the same age.
Yeah,
So at
point
the
a
same
game
time,
essentially. So.
right, exactly. And very similar. Like Tippett was a playmaker at the AHL
Well,
level.
that's kind of why I asked that in the sense, like, do you really want a guy as a point a game, ideally playing on the fourth line for you at the NHL level when you look like a guy that could give you some offense in the AHL, right? So I think they probably want to get him in a better spot, but just right now, the way the lineup's structured, it's a bit tougher.
Yeah, you have to wait for an injury or something. So yeah, the decor, I don't have too much to say about it. The only thing is just Zamula was in, obviously back from injury, and Andre's still with the Phantoms. He did have a goal the other day, as
Yeah, it was a
well.
nice shot. Puzzling to me. I mean, I think personally, I want to see Andre. I'm a big Andre guy. I just think at this point, like, there's, not too much left in the season. It's not like you're right there on the door knocking for, a
But the
playoff
Phantoms
spot.
are.
Yeah, the Phantoms are, and that's a great point to bring up. So like I appreciate that, Yariv. I would say for Andre, what I mean is, get him at the NHL for these last 20, 30 games so he can really like acclimate himself, then he's ready next season, like 100% and good to go, right? That's my thinking of it. But I think, the AHL run's very important as well for them, and they realize he's their number one defenseman, so that could factor into.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about the Phantoms, I guess, at the end, but actually, let's just do it now. So the Phantoms right now are 26, 19, 5-2. They are in a playoff spot. So when you do think of it like that, it's also like makes me think about Kolosov just sitting there. Even though Parker Gahagan is outplaying everybody right now, which is hilarious.
Yeah, you're taking the Phantoms' number one defenseman to get away when they're in the middle of a stretch run to make the playoffs. Like, do
Right.
you really want to do that just for Andre to like, have his taste of the NHL and get acclimated? You got to kind of weigh it, right, and see what's maybe the better decision. But.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we'll see what happens. If there's an injury, he's still the first call up, in my opinion. I don't think that they're going to move somebody else up to the NHL level at this point from the back
Yeah.
end, unless they need. I guess they need size. It'd be interesting if somebody like Risto does get moved. Andre's not necessarily the replacement, and they still have like Eric Johnson sitting there, and yeah, it's gonna probably get annoying for people. But I thought the D was adequate. It was all the minutes were evenly spread in this game, so it was like interesting. And obviously, Risto had the best game out of all the D. I think he was a +3. He had the
Yeah,
goal,
really
the
good
goal
at
and
coming back.
assist. He's continuing to do what he's doing. It's a shame he didn't get to play in that tournament because Finland really needed him, actually. And they obviously needed
Well,
Heiskanen the most,
yeah, their
but
decor was ravaged. They had like
yeah,
nobody on the back end. I think if they had any semblance of an actual decor, I think they would have had a lot stronger of a
he
tournament.
he would have done Bristol would have done well in that tournament too, and it would have helped his trade value. Again, I do not believe the Flyers are like heavily shopping him. I do think they're taking calls on him, as they should.
I think an
But I
overpay,
think,
right? Like we said.
yeah, but I think that was like the closest thing he would have had to playoff hockey,
Oh, of course. I mean,
which
you
is
can
like
you can really showcase playoff Risto at that point to other
right
teams and say, look what this guy could do for you, like during a playoff stretch. If especially if
playing
you could,
against top players.
yeah, especially if you could point to him like killing plays against the best players in the world, right? Look what he could
Yeah,
do again. Look what he could do against them, at the Stanley Cup playoff level for you during the playoff run too. So I think it would have been a great way for him to kind of cement his value even more. But I still think, if they wanted to trade him, they definitely could. It's just, do you want to trade him for what you'll get right now versus what you might get for him as an expiring contract? So that'll be kind of what they need to weigh, obviously. But
yeah, yeah. So yeah, special teams. So I just kind of did a review of special teams around the NHL like before I wrote up this show. Flyers currently power play is still 28th in the league with 16.2%.
not great.
Um, no, it's not great, but it's not as bad as last year. And the PK is 18th with 78.6%, which is also not bad. Considerably worse than last year. At least I think they were 83%,
They were in the top
84%.
10 last season, I believe,
They
right?
were top five, I
Wow,
thought.
even better. So
They were number one for a significant
yeah, they
portion. They
were
were
top
around 85%.
They were top five for a long time last
Yeah,
season, so it is a little bit of a disappointment to see the PK fall off because they started off the first month of the season like similar,
fantastic.
yeah,
Yeah,
similar kind of play, top 10, top five. But it has middled out. Like there was a stretch there where it was really bad. Now it's kind of gotten back to at least being reliable and not letting in goals like very consistently. So it's given them more of a chance to kind of come back and win some games, but it's not the greatest. I mean, their special teams in general, really the power play has been abysmal, but
yeah,
we all know
absolutely.
that.
Yes, it has been. Not as bad as last year. I'll keep saying that, and we kind of hinted at it already. Let's see what happens with Kuzmenko here, and if Michkov is back to form, that power play might actually go up as we cruise down here. If they can finish at 25, and not 28, if they can get up to like that 17.5%, maybe 18% even, I think we can call it an improvement. I know that sounds crazy because it's been terrible this year, but it hasn't been as bad as last year. That is a reality. Like,
No, it hasn't.
what were we at? 13% last year?
Yeah, it was
12%?
13% efficiency. It was garbage. I
Under
mean,
under 13, wasn't it?
I mean,
Was
I
it
gotta go back and
above? I
check.
can't remember either.
I don't
Yeah.
have the
Here, I'll check right
stats.
now. I'll check right now.
Yeah, I don't have the stats, but like, I'm sure it was not good. It was a very low percentage nonetheless, whether it was 13 or 12. I don't know, man. Like, even if it gets to 20 for me, uh, uh, like, it's
It
not
was
great.
12.2%, and their penalty kill was 83.4 for fourth best in the league.
Okay, yeah. So PK were pretty spot on. I would say for the power play, like, I'd like to see it get to 20th. That'd be a pretty stark improvement, 12 spots from last. Even if it does get to 20th, you have to fire Rocky Thompson nonetheless. Like it sounds bad to say that, but like um the schemes, the strategies, like they're just not working. Whatever he's been doing, it just doesn't seem to work,
I,
unfortunately. And he
yeah,
seems like a really nice guy. He seems like a
I,
nice guy.
I
He coaches the offense really well, but for whatever reason, the power play just does not seem to click. And it's like at this point, you had Danny Heatley come in and advise you, and John LeClaire, and this whole brain
Patrick
trust
Sharp,
together,
yeah,
and it's all not
Danny
working.
Briere, who's
So
like a
the
power
the
play
one
genius.
constant theme in all of it not working is that Rocky Thompson is still the power play coach. So I think at this point it just makes sense. Like, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me the third time, like you're a fucking idiot. So you might as well just
Well,
fire Rocky Thompson at this point.
I
But
don't know if they're gonna fire him, but I would at the very least want them to bring in like a specialist coach, like a power play specialist coach. Like I
I just
don't
think
think
I
that is
just
crazy.
No, it's not.
We've
Like,
had it
sure,
before.
sure, you could keep him. I mean, do whatever you like. I just think for having such a poor performance at something that's specifically your job for 3 or 4 years straight, there needs to be
The
consequences.
NHL. It's the
Yeah, there needs to
NHL.
be consequences,
Yes,
right?
yeah, it's
So
the NHL. This is the toughest. This is like the most ruthless league in the. We fired Lavi after fucking what 3 games. It's like
that's why I just don't understand. It's not like the thing would be like if he was like a coach where there was like a track record you could point to, like, he
this
coached
is
the
the
power
best the
play.
power plays ever looked under his tenure.
But yeah, but okay, so he was the power play coach for San Jose, I believe,
Yeah,
before he joined the Flyers. When he was the power play coach for San Jose, they were
they
also
finished at the
like
bottom.
in the bottom 3 or 4 of the league. So like, it's not like you could point to his prior success or something and be like, "Well, look at that team that he
He
was
also
on. They were
wasn't an
really good."
offensive player when he played too. He was like a tough guy.
Well, that's whatever. I don't look at that too much, because even if you were a tough guy, doesn't mean you can't understand schematically
I
like what to do
I
or
agree.
where
I
to kind of
I totally
place
agree.
guys. You might want to have a guy that's more offensively inclined in that role potentially, but
Well, I
I
think
don't
about
think.
Joey Mullen, who was an offensive guy, and that's when our power play was the best.
No, of course, yeah. So definitely a great point. I just think like you look at his results tangibly, you can't think about anything else other than moving on from him. And it's not like, there's any record to look at of prior success. Like if he was a power play coach that maybe like coached for some other team and, consistent seasons, 5, 10 seasons of power plays above the 15th rank or more, and you could tangibly point to that and say, hey, look for all these seasons this guy was really really good, ran really really successful power play schematically, a bunch of different rosters too. So that kind of proves that he knows what it takes and knows kind of what to do and what to look at to run a successful power play at the NHL level. But none of that's there. There's no success anywhere to be found. So it's just, I just don't understand. You can keep throwing him out there in the same role when he's been failing consistently, right? So
Yeah, yeah. And then I would just to
not to be
bring this,
harsh or anything, because he seems like a nice guy, but
yeah, we're very harsh on him. Um, but I was looking at the power play percentages and like the penalty kill percentages, and man, like Washington and the Devils. The Devils are at 27.9%
really
power
good.
play and
Yeah.
84.2% penalty kill. And then Washington is at a 24.2% power play and an 81.9. It's like
We say it all the time. Special teams matters. If you have a good penalty kill and a good power play, the chances of you being a top team or a team that's at least going to be in that playoff mix is considerably
you
higher, right?
you want to hear a really terrible contradiction to that?
Sure. Why is there
The,
is there a terrible team in the top of the league
yes.
that with terrible stats
The
and special
Chicago
teams?
Blackhawks have a 25.2% power play, good for
Okay,
sixth in the league. Their penalty kill is an 81.2.
fair. But that's
Good
probably
enough
an
for eight.
outlier. It's
Yeah,
probably an
it is an
outlier.
outlier. Yes, it's
But
the
it's
only
rare.
the only
It's
bad
rare.
team doing that. All the other teams at the top of this list are all
Playoff teams.
either definite playoff teams or at the very least a bubble team. Chicago is the only one that is a disaster
Maybe
of a
Bedard
team.
factor.
Penguins, I guess, have a good
That
power
could be
play.
Bedard factor on the. I mean, the power play Bedard. I'm sure that makes a difference.
Yeah, the Penguins finished with a terrible power play last year. This year they have 24.7%. So they managed to turn it around.
I mean, when you have Sidney Crosby and Eric Carlson and Genny Malkin and Chris
And
Letang,
Letang, yeah.
you're probably all right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just think to put a nail in the coffin, and Rocky Thompson's coffin, and the power play's coffin in general, you probably just have to move on from him. And I think, like, tangibly as a management staff, how can you look at the results and think otherwise? Like, it just hasn't been good at all.
Yeah. Just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell for notifications. For the audio version, go to Spotify and iTunes and give us a rating and a following as well. Again, that is the best way to support this show. So if you made it this far and you haven't done that so far, please do that on whatever avenue you are listening or watching this on. Okay, so the Four Nations ended. You mentioned it earlier. Canada took home the victory after, a lot of very contentious rivalry has kind of been reignited. It's always kind of been there. USA obviously took the first game. Canada took the second game. It's almost like a shame that they only played a 1-game series because, If it
Should
was like a
need the rubber
three,
match, right?
yeah. Oh my God, it would have been
Well,
awesome.
it's similar to the World Cup in 2016. USA beat Canada in the round robin, then Canada beats them again in the final. So we
Yeah,
got to see now if the US can bounce back in the Olympics and play
yeah.
gold. I think it's going to be really close. Like the US had such a good team. To be honest, without Bennington, like and me as a Canadian, I can admit this. Me and my buddies, walked to the game talking about it. It's hilarious because we were trashing Bennington
Everybody was, yeah,
a lot, not just us. Pretty much everybody in Canada was
yeah.
trashing Bennington, and he locked in, he dialed in for that final game. He's the reason that Canada won. I would
He's
say, right?
he's got a
If he,
strong head on his shoulders,
oh,
at
of course,
least.
but if he doesn't make that blocker save on Matthews and that glove save on Kachuk, where he absolutely robs him there's no chance, right? Like, there's no chance
Yeah,
for Canada. Still in his head. I just thought it was hilarious the fact that for Bennington
amazing.
that well, it's just funny that he locks in for the Stanley Cup win in 2019 in TD Garden, Game 7, and then he's back in TD Garden. It's almost like he's like reshuffling memories in his mind, like, oh my God, I'm back here, I can do it again. Then the
Yeah,
guy dials in and just like plays like prime Marty Brodeur in the overtime or something.
yeah. I mean, it was actually kind of nice that if you take yourself out of like who wins and who loses or whatever, not caring
Such
about
a
your
good
country.
game.
Yeah, it's just amazing hockey overall in general. I do think U.S. benching Kreider and then I forget who they didn't play in favor of Kreider too.
Oh no, they
Oh,
put Kreider
Connor.
in. They put Kreider in for Connor. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, obviously Connor probably should have played that game because Kreider got benched in that game as well, and then to lose Matthew to Chuck, pretty much like outside of Brady to Chuck, maybe the most heroic player they had. That definitely hurt USA.
Oh,
Like
of
not having
course.
Matthew to Chuck, I
And
think
no
was
Quinn Hughes on the back end. So
no, he played. He played in
Quinn
that game.
Hughes? No.
I thought he did.
No, he didn't play. Jack Hughes, his brother was in,
I
but
I totally thought that he was in the
no,
game.
there
All
was
right, well,
rumors. There was rumors, but
oh,
no.
that's what it was. He was in
Yeah, there
Vancouver
was
in the
rumors.
end.
It was rumored that he could play, but he never did because like he never actually joined the team, so he wasn't able to. But yeah, so Hughes never played. But I would say for the U.S., it's a huge loss for them, right? Like if you have an offensive player like Hughes in there, who knows what could happen? I would
Yeah,
say Matthew Tkachuk's the bigger loss though because he was looking so good, had a
yeah.
hand in their first
That
goal.
line in general
Yeah,
with the Chuck
was
brothers.
that line was crazy. So I would say for them, like they probably are just excited that we have another shot to take Canada on potentially at the Olympics,
Yeah,
healthy lineup, and see what
theoretically.
happens.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, theoretically, right, and see what happens. But you just gotta look at the success overall for the NHL in terms of growing the game, right? Like so many people watching that probably don't watch hockey regularly. So many casual fans watching. Like we said, I think there was like a crazy stat that I saw. Let me see here. I have the exact stats somewhere. One moment. Let me pull it up, guys. Here we go. So yeah, so 9.3 million viewers for Canada USA final on ESPN during that viewing time. So just think about how many people watching hockey. I think it was more than even like a bunch of Stanley Cups in terms of ratings. So I think just to ignite casual fans to be interested and say like, hey, look at best on best in terms of hockey. When we get these guys together, they really are motivated. They put everything out there on the line. Whereas you had NBA All-Star Weekend happening the exact same time. And if you look at the intensity in these games versus that NBA All-Star game, you would have laughed. It would have been like a joke, right?
well,
So
yeah. The NHL All Star games are also a joke, but
no, of course, but
I
but
totally
this
agree.
just proves it. This just proves that like why do an All-Star game when you can have something like this that can really grow the game, get people excited, right? Whereas the All-Star game, I think it almost paints a negative light because the guys don't even try, and like
Yeah,
it's almost like like you said, a joke, basically.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting how they're going to do this again, obviously, because it clearly made them a bunch of money. And I'm very much hoping that Russia is involved next time. Maybe they do a Czechia team, maybe they do a Young Stars team again. Obviously, they could do like a rest of the world roster as well. Um, you
Elliot
know,
Friedman was mentioning something on his podcast, essentially was just saying that the NHL really wants to expand to other teams, and their goal is to talk to other leagues, like to see if they can pause maybe during the same time. So you could have a more filled out Czechia team. You don't just have to rely on Czech Republic NHL players.
Right.
Same with like a Slovakia, even same with the Russia, because there might be some
Russian.
guys in
Yeah.
the KHL that they would rather have. Because basically what they were saying is they would rather rely on the actual nationality to build up the rivalries versus having like a rest of the world team or like a North America team,
Sure.
because you build up more of that rivalry when it's you're playing for your actual country, which I understand.
Yeah. They just have to contend with the IIHF, so that's going to be
We'll
probably.
see if they can get it to work. I mean, they got 2 years to discuss. The IHF, I think, has to look at it this way. Like, if you're trying to grow the game of hockey, how can you realistically say that something like this isn't going to do that? So I just think negotiate, try to see what you can do to maybe pause at the same time to get the best players at the tournament possible.
Yeah.
Because it's the best thing to do for the game of hockey, right? You can see that people want to watch this best on best, and it's an easy way to get people involved and to kind of get people and eyes on the product, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. And it does a lot better than IIHF's tournament in the off season, which is like,
A joke as
yeah.
well.
Yeah. Like nobody really watches that.
Well, think about all the players in the playoffs still, right? That don't
Right.
get to go.
The top players in the world are not in those tournaments. So, okay, so let's do a little off-season conversation here. I'm going to move this up and just bring up that Yuso Valimaki just went through waivers, which is kind of like a surprising name. He did clear waivers, but this is like a type of guy that I actually thought the Flyers should take a look at. They probably, I don't even know what his contract is actually.
Pretty cheap, I think. I don't think it's anything crazy.
Yeah, but I was surprised that nobody bid on this guy. He makes $2 million a year, so maybe that's a little pricey for people. And he's a UFA in 26, so he's got 2 years. Well, the rest of this year and next year at $2 million a year. Yeah, again, doesn't really produce offensively or anything, but could still be like a good player. Like for Utah, he's played 43 games this year. He's only has 5 points, but he's still relatively young. I think he's like
It's
20,
26.
26 years old. So this is a guy that if you move Risto, maybe you look at Valimaki, but at the same time, we're trying to find space for Andre. So I just thought he was an interesting name because, again, this is another one of those things where like people are obsessed with first round picks. They never want to point out the ones that don't turn into what you think they're going to be. But he was the 16th overall pick and highly touted in his draft year. I think he was even slated to go above 16 at one point. So we've seen this happen with a bunch of guys, but I thought it was interesting of note. The other thing is there was the big story after the Four Nations that Connor McDavid flew on a charter flight with Konechny and Sanheim, and people, that was obviously being spread around. And I was just like, "Whoa, let the games begin,"
I think every Flyers fan saw that. I was like, oh my God.
Right. So,
What's
like,
happening?
on one hand, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah,
Right.
it's pretty unrealistic. I mean, let's be real. Like, they're giving a guy a ride back because they're going to the same exact place. They're being
Right,
nice.
right. That is the reality. But I do want to talk about the fact that there is no guarantee at this point that McDavid is re-signing in Edmonton.
Oh, of course.
It is
Yeah.
the more likely scenario because these players don't typically leave the team that drafted them, who's willing. But there is an argument to be made, not just that he would leave Edmonton, but that he would even come to Philadelphia. I don't think that's that crazy. I think we're the bigger sports market. He makes more money because of the taxes and the fact that the U.S. dollar is stronger. And the fact that there's going to be a bunch of teams out there bidding for this guy. The Flyers are going to have a substantial amount of cap space that to be able to match pretty much any offer that's out there. And they also are still, we're looking at let's say a season and a half away from that, where the Flyers, we've been pointing out the cap and how it's telling you kind of the story of what the Flyers are doing. We haven't been wrong so far. The Flyers come in with a couple good off seasons here, start becoming a bubble team, hopefully next year, right? Like become a better team next year. And then all of a sudden it becomes more realistic where you can sell a guy like McDavid. I'm not saying that we're getting him, but I'm saying this is how you make that pitch, right? We have the market, we have the budget to bring you over. You're going to be in one of the biggest sports cities in the world, definitely in the country of the United States, right? He also isn't like super famous here, so he can live like kind of a more normal life. Though he is going to take over all of sports news if he does come here. He's
If he
too
comes,
big of
yeah,
a
if he
name.
goes to the States, I mean, it's going to be a huge deal because he's going to
Yeah.
know who he is. Then I'm
Yes.
sure some people already know who he is. I mean, he's on a lot of commercials. They see his face, but best player in the
Not in
league,
America.
maybe. I mean, in Canada, we know who he is. That's for
Right.
sure.
Obviously,
I will say.
hockey
Um,
Jesus in Canada.
yeah, literally. I mean, you look at it this way, right? The Flyers next season have 26.2 projected cap space. The season following 26-27, they have 57 million projected technically in terms of cap or Puckpedia and what they're kind of projecting there. But I would say like you look at a guy like McDavid, is he going to resign with Edmonton? Probably, like probably will resign with them.
Yeah.
But you have to factor in he wants to win a cup. So let's say they get really close the next couple of years, doesn't happen. I mean, at that point, he's almost 30 years old. Does he think, okay, let me go to UFA, let me see what I can get, let me see what the offers are, let me see what teams are interested.
Yeah.
The
And
one
he
thing you
will
have,
have an interest from
well,
31
at
NHL teams.
32, yeah, 32 teams, Edmonton included,
32.
will
Yeah.
want to sign him back. The thing for the Flyers will be, okay, you have a ton of cap space, throw a $25 million contract at him, really overpay him. Maybe that's how you get him here. It's an unrealistic, thing that he's going to come here. The only thing that I would say is, I mean, that you have like in your back pocket is you can give him an exorbitant amount of money. I would just say if he's going to leave Edmonton, he's probably going to be leaving to go to like the next best cup contender. So if
Yeah.
you know,
But
it's
they have
going
to
to
be able to
be,
afford him.
yeah, that too. So we'll see what happens. But I mean, at this point, expect him to probably stay with the Oilers. But
Yeah. I mean, like,
it's a
look,
fun thing to talk
the
about
the
and think
the
about. So
Flyers of the past would have been one of the top teams in on McDavid if he did
they still should be in on him. I just
right.
don't know if they'll be
Well,
successful. But
this is what I'm saying.
yeah,
The way the team is right now, currently, he's not coming here. If they make the right moves over the next year and a half, and they really show the league that they are heading in the right direction, that they're like the third youngest team in the league, that they are that they've converted their roster, they've gotten through the other side of the rebuild, and really they can just insert McDavid into the lineup, and you're like, no, you see, we put you right in this lineup, and we're a cup contender. That's how you have to make that pitch.
of
You
course.
can't
Yeah.
you can't make that pitch to a guy like McDavid without him being able to see that.
Yeah,
Right?
that's
You
what I
can't be
mean.
an average team and do it.
That's what I mean. So like if there is any semblance of this occurring, they're gonna have to make a lot of moves in the next 2 years,
Yes.
basically.
Well, but I think they will be. Right? Like I don't, we kind of went into the offseason or to this trade deadline not expecting much, but now that like Frost
I
and
I
Farabee have
think
been moved,
Risto and Lawton could be moved for sure.
right,
That's my thought.
exactly. Like yeah, like and that's just during the season. And those are four players already that are like core players to this roster. So like and that's without an off season. Like I think there are going to be a lot of changes coming, and I don't know if the Flyers are like tanking type of changes. Like I think they're going to look for guys who fit in and be like, okay, this guy can be here for the next 5 years, right? And maybe he can be here for the next 5 to
Well,
10,
yeah, they're
depending on
obviously
what you can
trying to
find.
target like a certain age group, right? Like they're trying
Right,
to bring in guys
mid
between
20s,
22 and 26, ultimately. So we'll see. I just think,
maybe
a
even
big,
28 if they're the right
yeah,
player.
it would have to be the right guy and a guy that fills a need for them most likely. I would say like Ristolainen and Lawton, like I mean, right, not to say writings on the wall, but like you see those two guys being used on Power Play One. I mean, I would say like there's a little bit of a reason for that. Like you saw how good Sean Couturier is playing with Matvey Michkov right now. Why is that not
Well,
happening right on the power play? You have Lawton there instead. Is there a reason for that? Do they think maybe, hey, let's showcase him a little bit? Is that why they have Ristolainen in there instead of a Drysdale, who they should be trying to kind of groom for that number one spot on the power
right.
play? That's kind of my thoughts, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. And we'll see. Obviously, like a team like the Rangers would be heavily involved, and they get everybody they want. You know what I mean? There's LA out there too. That McDavid could go to LA, right? Like teams can always trade guys out to try to grab McDavid too. So we're far away from that. But I don't think it's that preposterous to think of the idea that McDavid would be testing the UFA market. Again, it depends what Edmonton does. It depends how the league shapes out over the
Well, I
next year and
think
a
if he
half.
doesn't win a cup in the next 2 years, he'll go to UFA. assumption.
I
Like
think
if he
he
doesn't,
should,
no, well, I
but
just think if he doesn't, he's probably going to be thinking like, "Am I ever going to win with Edmonton? I might as well try with another team that's also knocking on the door
be,
here, and I
well,
can have my pick because I'm the best player in the league."
I don't think he'll get the fair, but I don't think he's going to get the most amount of money if he goes to his best chance of winning a cup.
No, but he might not
Right.
care about that. He might just care
Right.
about winning, right?
He's
So
still
that's
going to get like the most in the league, but he won't get like I don't know if 25 is even a realistic number, but
well,
let's say 20 million.
that's kind of my point though. Like if you're McDavid and you're like, well, the Flyers are giving me 25, but they've only been to round one of the playoffs, and then the Rangers are like, well, we'll give you 20 million, and like we went to the third round last year or something, right? You gotta factor it in from his perspective. So he's gonna go with the team that he thinks is closer to winning.
Yeah.
That's just what I
He might
think.
also just want to stay in Canada. He might be like I want to go to Toronto,
Let's
which is
go to
like
the Leafs.
ridiculous.
Oh God.
It's not likely, but it's pot or even Canadians, you know?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. This sounds preposterous, but like I could even think about Vegas. I don't know what they would do with the cap. They'd have to do a ton of maneuvering, but they're always in on everybody. Like I saw
That is true.
I saw the rumor that Rantanen might get flipped again by Carolina.
Yeah.
And me and my buddies were talking about it, and they're like, "Who do you think he'll go to?" And I'm like, "Fuck, probably Vegas." Like
Yeah.
I'm just thinking in the back of my head, I'm like, how will they make it work? I don't know, but like they
I
probably will somehow.
I don't think he's going to get traded in season again. I think they're going to use him for the for again, they have a Stanley Cup that they're trying to win. I think they're going to go for that and then he might walk away for nothing. And
Well,
that's
the
just
thing
it. And it
is,
is
there
what it
was
is.
reports the last couple of days, and they were saying they were trying to resign him, and they were super far on a number, right? So like you already spent those assets in Natchez, and you can't even sign the guy. Will they try to flip him again and get something else because Carolina's so cheap, right, with their owner? So I really wonder what's
Yeah,
gonna.
no, it's not impossible, but I'm like, what are you going to get that's going to be equal to helping you win a Stanley Cup to Mikko Rantanen?
It's just so weird, like what Carolina does sometimes. Like they made this trade, now they're just like, shit, we can't resign him. Like we're too
Well,
cheap to do that.
people kept talking about how Eric Tolsky is like going to be this amazing GM because he's like a numbers analytics guy, and I didn't buy that. I'm not commenting on him already, and he hasn't been in the job that often, but being a GM is not just looking at analytics and understanding again, I think analytics are so overvalued by the online community. It is ridiculous. It is just a tool. It is just a tool. Being
It's
a
a
GM
well,
is such a different role. In fact, you know how I know that it's a joke because it's what's his name was also heavily involved. Fletcher loved analytics. He even talked about how he put the trade into the analytics machine and it validated his trade. That is not what makes you a great GM. Being able to negotiate, being ballsy, which Tolsky was ballsy with this trade, so I'm going to give him credit on that. Just depends on how, and he was ballsy with the Gensel, but he got burnt on that too. So you got to be a guy who can sell a vision to these players. It's not just the money with Rantanen. You have to sell him on the life that he will have in that city.
well,
And that is
yeah,
not
but
easy to do.
you also have to negotiate with your owner and understand how much
Right,
money you
who's
can
also
pay
a
him.
problem. Right.
So like
And that's also a
the fact you didn't
100%.
do your due diligence as the GM and talk to the owner to be like, hey, I'm gonna make this big trade. Like, are you actually gonna sign this fucking guy, or are you gonna let him
Well,
walk again because you're cheap?
in
Right?
fairness to them, like Carolina is a great place to live. So like they're
Yeah.
probably also thinking like, why wouldn't you want to live here? Like it's
But he
beautiful
also
here.
wants like 14 million. So it's just like you have to know, like, hey, like you're trading for me, like be prepared to pony up to 14 million because that's what he
And
was asking for
and
with
if
Colorado, right?
yeah, and if you offer him less for a while, he's just gonna lose interest in you. He's just gonna be
Because
like,
he's thinking I'm worth this. Another team will pay me this on the open market, which is he's right. Some other team
yes,
will pay him that on the open
yeah,
market.
100%
So
because he's worth it. Mikko Rantanen is worth the money. Like this is not the type of player you lowball.
well, that's
You know
why
what
it's
I'm
strange
saying?
to me. Like that's why it just shows me that um like they're lowballing him because that's all they got approved to give him, in my opinion.
Right.
But that's just I don't know. It just doesn't make a lot of
It
sense.
wasn't a smart trade by Carolina, in my opinion. I
I would
think they were already,
I think if you would have kept Natchez, it would have just
he was so affordable.
but he was so good for them too, so affordable, and then like you worry about the contract later in 2 years now that you just bridged him. But
I don't understand why both teams made the trade, to be honest with you, and why
well,
Colorado just
I
couldn't
get it
find a
why
way to make it work.
I get it why Colorado did it because I think they're up against the cap, so whatever number that he was looking for, they wouldn't have technically been able to give it to him. Whereas like Nation isn't going to get 14 million.
Yeah.
He's going to get like 10 or 12 maybe, and that's 2 years
Yeah.
away. So
Yeah. So we brought it up already. Rasmus Ristolainen. How do we feel about trading him now? And same with Lawton. We'll package them both together. How do we feel now that the Flyers are in the position that they're in? I almost don't want them to make a run, and I think they could make a run. I'm still much more open personally to trading Lawton over Risto. Risto, I'm a little worried about trading him again because I look at the Flyers defense and I'm like, there's nobody in this organization like Rasmus Ristolainen. Not like Bonk is not a highly physical defenseman. We don't have any top four physical defensemen in this organization outside of Risto. Like maybe Sanheim a little bit, but it's an undersized D as it is. And I'm just kind of like, I don't want to hold on to him forever, but I'm kind of like, okay, if we get rid of Risto, there is like a tanking vibe here. If you get rid of Lawton, you're like, okay, we get it. The team is ready to mature beyond Lawton. You know, we have other guys coming up. We have a numbers game here. We got Luchenko coming. You know what I mean? Luchenko literally just swaps in for Lawton in the roster, right? And or even Barkey, right? Who's like also having a great OHL run, right? Maybe it's not the beginning of the year, maybe it's second half. You know what I mean? But like, those replacements are so evident. Where like Risto is not that evident. Again, I think I go back to what we initially said. It depends on what the return is. If the return is what we're looking for, like with 7 picks in the first 50, arguably the first 50 selections in this draft, like that's crazy. Like, is another late first round pick that important to us right now? Only if I would say only if the Flyers have like this aggressive mindset where they're like, yeah, we're gonna package 4 of these picks and move up to grab Matthew
whoever we
Schaefer,
want. Well, yeah,
you know,
that's what I mean. So
or James Hagens
that's
or
like what
something.
I kind of want to say, right? So I think it just depends on what they're looking for and what they're trying to do. I
Right.
think Lawton's probably more realistic, just because you can sell other teams that you not only get him for this run, but you get him for the next run, because he has the 1 year deal left, right? So you have the 1 year extra. You can sell him on the fact that, or sell other teams on the fact that okay, you're not only just getting him for this, you're getting him for another playoff run. So you can kind of almost max his value out that way and get a good return by selling teams on the fact that you have 2 runs there. Ristolainen's a little bit different because more money involved, and then obviously with Ristolainen too, I believe he's got 2 years left, not the 1 year, right?
Yes.
After this, so
Yes.
there's a little bit more of term, so you might not have as many teams kind of willing to take on the salary for that long, just due to like the overall cap and kind of what's happening. Salary is going to be rising, cap is going to be going up, but still, it's more of a commitment. A guy on a 2 year deal after
I
this season
agree.
versus a guy on a 1 year. I just think it's going to depend on like the return. Like
I
if they are looking for first round picks and they want to kind of weaponize that ammo to either make big splash at the draft or move up and get somebody, then I think they could definitely trade him. But you also could look at it like you wait an extra year, and then maybe becomes more attractive because there's less term left and you maybe maximize the value even more. So there's two
Yeah.
ways to kind of go.
Well, yeah, I think all of that is true. I think we and as a fan base are a little, and I'm not even talking about us. Maybe this is not something I shouldn't say, but I think the fan base is a little delusional on Risto's contract. I think people are under the assumption that this guy is being overpaid, but I do not think he's being overpaid. Like I was listening to Daily Face Off, and they were like, "Oh, would you eat a portion of Risto's salary to get like a late first round pick?" I'm like, I don't think you need to eat a bit of his salary at all. If you look at the comparisons, like a team even asking for you to eat
Okay.
salary, the phone gets hung up on you immediately. Because if you look at the marketplace and the players who provide lesser impact than him, like Zadorov, for example, guys with a worse reputation who are not as good as Risto are making Risto money, and we're opening up into a rising cap, right? where the cap is going to go up and these defensemen are all going to get paid what Risto gets paid, if not higher, and he is going to be a bargain. So it's like, I think the idea of eating cap, then I want a high first round pick, which again, nobody's given us a high first round pick for Risto. But like my whole thing would be like, okay, I want like a really good prospect and a first round pick for him. Like my thing for him is like, this guy is going to play in your top four. I'm not under like the disillusion that Risto's only good because he's on the Flyers and he's not going to play. I don't think so. I think he's a
No, he's
great
a top four. He's a really good number 3
and a
or number 4
complimentary
defenseman.
guy as well. To a, like if you have a very offensive, really good defenseman, Risto can step in and play shutdown minutes
Of
for
course.
you with
I
that
think,
guy.
yeah,
That's a high value,
that's a high value. The fact
and
that he
he's
can
locked in for a short term.
that's a high
2
value. The
years.
fact that he can kill plays, the fact that he's physical and big, that's all a part of it. I think another thing too that people fail to realize is if you need him to step up into an offensive role, like play on the power play, he can also do that and has produced points in the past, right? So I think that's just another thing to kind of point out. Like,
He's just
so
extremely versatile.
yeah, exactly, right? So I think for the Flyers, like it's going to be tough in the sense that you trade him, who's really replacing those minutes. I think that's kind of the point, right? Where it's like, what's the
Nope,
return versus what's
no
the
one
return that
right
you're
now.
what was that?
No
Sorry.
one right now. It would have to be an off-season move to bring in
Yeah,
somebody else.
exactly, right. But like, what's the return versus what you're losing by getting rid of him? Are you going to be able to replace him in the offseason, let's say? So who knows, right?
Potentially,
Yeah, like I think it just depends on what they're looking to do. Like if they are thinking, okay, we need to move him because we want to get an extra pick because we're trying to be real aggressive and make like moves to add for the future and add like long-term core pieces based on the like the assets you're getting from the Risto trade and it kind of all comes in together, then sure. But we'll see, right? Like I think it's just a wait and see. I think it's going to depend on firstly, okay, what is the return? Also, how desperate are teams at the deadline? Like, is Risto going to be kind of one of those only defensemen left, which causes the price to rise? Then, if you're Briere, you just can't say no at that point. You're kind of just like the
he's
offers
gonna
here.
be.
I can't really say no now, right?
Yeah, and I think people really underestimate how much a 6'5" defender who can skate and is playing well and is right-handed is worth in this league. Like we paid a stupid price to get this guy over here. Somebody else is going to pay a stupid price to get him. You know, we gave a mid first round pick to get him over here. We didn't give up a late first round
So
pick.
that's what I mean. Like, can you potentially squeeze the value for it to be even more than what
Yeah,
you
I think so.
right? So
I think so. I think that's what the Flyers should do. It's not that I think they should never trade Risto. I'm just like I'm in no rush to move this guy.
well,
He's
that's why
locked.
maybe next year. That's why maybe next year, like you said, it depends. It all depends on what the offer is. That's why next year might be more attractive. He's still going to be under contract, in 2025, 26. And then if you trade him in 2025, 26, then it's like the same thing you're doing with Lawton this year, where like if you're a team acquiring him, let's say next trade deadline, if you were to trade him, then you're getting him for that run next season. You're getting him for that full season. So it's almost like you're not just a rental, you're still getting him for kind of a little bit more. But at that point, let's say the Flyers next season, they end up being a team that's closer to the playoffs. You're not going to want to move on from it at the deadline if you're kind of on the bubble and looking to take that step. So might be the time to move him potentially.
Yeah, no, that might be 100% true. It just needs to be a good value. And look, if we lose him, fine. We'll look for another big defenseman to put in a bottom pairing role because we probably won't find somebody in the top four for a price we want to pay, right? And that will give us the term we want. That's the other thing is like his term is 2 years beyond this year. It's not a long-term deal that you're locked in with Risto too. So
It's
like
attractive,
you
yeah.
can't find that in UFA. You're not going to be able to find Risto in UFA.
For 2 years, no, yeah.
No.
No, not at all. That's what I mean. That's why
There's also not many of him that are going to be
that's why
available.
you could potentially sell a team on this, right? So we'll have to see what happens in the next couple of weeks. It's going to be interesting. I just think, like it only makes sense to move Lawton at this point. I just think for me, like, and what he brings, like the next step for the team is to maybe progress without him potentially as a leader and see where that
I think
goes.
so too.
Especially if you get a really, decent return for him that you can't kind of say no to. Like it's a no-brainer. Risto's a little bit like one where I'm on the fence on, just in the sense that I think if you wait even till next season, you might be able to maximize even more, but you might have to just take what you're offered because who knows if that same deal's around, right? Like, and who knows if you're doing the same thing next season, like you might not even be trying to sell at that point. So
Yeah, but you also you have to be able to make tough decisions, and trading Risto is a tough decision, and I'm for it. I want to make that very clear. I'm for trading Risto, but I'm not for trading Risto if it's just like a late first round pick and in this year's draft, and that's all we're getting. Like I
Don't trade
don't.
him just to trade him. Yeah,
Right,
gotcha.
exactly. Like that I think we need to, if we're really going to do this right, we need to value our own things, make tough decisions, and we I think we need to move on from a lot of guys on this roster before we're good, right? Like I really only think of the guys who are like mid 20s as guys who we have to keep. Like even Ryan Paling, I really like him, but I don't think Ryan Paling needs to be here, right?
Yeah.
Like he could
Is he
be a
your
guy that
4C on a championship team? I don't really
Gar-
know at this point.
Garnet Hathaway. It's another guy. I don't think he needs to be here when we're a good team. Like I like him. He's a good piece for a good team. You know, there's a team out there who will want him, but
If
he's
you
not
could get a
like
second rounder for him right now, would you trade him?
yes, 100
Yeah,
percent,
exactly, right? I mean, so
100%.
that's what I mean. Like, if you're the Flyers, you got to think about like, are these guys going to be here when it's time to win? And maybe we can, if not, maybe you turn that into an asset you can use to then kind of build your
I
team more into that contender,
I'd
right?
actually be more interested in grabbing somewhat developed prospects from other teams. You know, like the Lawton is the what's his name, Fraser
Fraser
Minton.
Minton's interesting, yeah.
Like the guys like that who are like 20 years old, 19 years old, who have already been drafted, who we liked at the time, who are showing promise, who be like, yeah, we'll give you our older piece so you can go win a cup now, and we're gonna take that younger piece to try, like we did with the Giroux trade. Like we need to find these guys, and that's a big thing that the Eagles did too. Like they filled in their roster with other guys who they gave a second chance to, who flourished here. We need to do that stuff, right? So if I'm moving Risto, like I want a young Risto to replace him. When we traded Alexei Zhidnik back in the day, we traded him for Braden Coburn. That was one of the best trades
Well,
the
that's a
Flyers
really
ever
good
made.
trade, yeah.
Right, like that's the stuff we need to be looking at, in my opinion, is bringing the younger guys like a Jacob Peltier, even right, like younger guys who are showing promise, who can hopefully we
Yeah, it
get
might show
what we
something.
want from him. Yeah,
Exactly.
who they show that they can be part of a championship team, and we need to identify them. And if they're not, right, if we put them in that Farabee Frost category, they need to go quickly, right? That we flip them, and we do that for the next 2 years until we find the right combination, because we already have a core group of guys that we can identify that probably will be here for that. And I believe York is one of those. I know a lot of people are not. I think Sanheim is going to be one of those guys. TK, Michkov, obviously, Forrester for sure. I think Bobby Brink's like kind of there potentially. I think Noah Cates is in that camp, right? I think Couturier is in that camp because of his contract, but also can be a great bottom six guy at the end of his career, right? Like we need to identify these roles now and project outward, and I think that's a big thing. So like I don't just want picks. I want more guarantees than
Yeah,
just
try to build your roster like you know
right,
what you're looking for. See if you can get maybe these young players that fit the roles you're trying to
right,
kind of fill, right?
exactly. Um, yeah. So I have a whole list here. We don't need to go through this in depth, but it was a Instagram post that I saw, and I just wanted to go through the names. So these are guys who are like rumored. I don't believe like half of these, but they
Yeah,
have
whatever. List them out and let's see.
yeah. So they have this NHL trade deadline predictions. These are all names that are like potentially could be moved. So they have Mikko Rantanen, Brock Nelson, Dylan Cousins, Brock Besser, Seth Jones, which is an interesting one who I think will get moved. They'll have to eat his contract if they do want to move him. He was overpaid from day one. Elias Pettersson is on there. Ryan Donato, I think he could definitely be moved. Jared McCann, Casey Middlestat, Jake Evans, um, Mario Ferraro, Brandon Tanev, JG Pajot. He could definitely. Well, I don't know. They're freaking weird. The Islanders. Scott Lawton, obviously. Ivan Provorov is a really interesting one. I think that Columbus would want to re-sign him, but I think he probably will want to move. To be honest with you, so I could see Ivan Provorov potentially getting traded
Yeah.
at this trade deadline. I could
Yeah, we'll
definitely
see. I
see it.
mean, it'll be interesting because Columbus is right on the door for a wild
Right,
card, so
that's
we'll see
the
what they want to
problem
do.
too for them. Yeah. It's a problem for them because they want to make the playoffs to make that money and be relevant. Kyle Palmieri is on there. Owen Power, which I'm like,
That makes no fucking sense.
why?
Sorry. Yeah.
Why, dude? I even looked at his numbers. I was like, he is
Young.
well on his way to being at the very least a
Was he only
legitimate top
drafted two
pairing.
years? Was he only drafted 2 years?
Yeah, and maybe it was three now, but he's like on a 45-point pace, 50-point
And
pace.
also the Sabres stink.
20,
So
yeah, and he's
like
21 years old. I guess you could make the case that like you move him for like something big.
for a center, like maybe they're trying to like move him for forward, maybe. But I don't know.
I wouldn't move Owen Power, but
He's
Bowen
only
Byram,
he's only 22 and was drafted in the 2021 draft, so it's only been
right?
3 seasons.
Yeah, he didn't.
Yeah,
And the
like
first year he went back to college too.
yeah, I don't know. That's a weird one. I don't
I don't.
agree with
Yeah,
that.
I think that one's crazy. Bowen Byram. Again, why would you move either one of these guys?
But didn't they just trade for Byram last season? The fact that you're
Yeah,
gonna trade
for
for him in
Casey
one
Middleton.
season and then move him the next season after.
Yeah,
Even Middlestad for Colorado, I don't think is a realistic one. Like you're not gonna trade a guy you just acquire essentially.
right.
So
Yeah, they had Middlestack going to Nashville in this. Brandon Dumoulin, Yanni Gord. I
I
could
could
see
see
that. Brandon Dumoulin as well. I think he probably will get moved. And he's a good playoff asset.
I wonder Yanni Gord back to Tampa, man.
Dumoulin is a guy that like I would consider bringing in house if we trade Risto
Yeah,
to
he's a
be
good
like,
veteran.
yeah, play third line, or he'd be like the Luke Shen role.
Yeah, good veteran guy. Yanni Gord, I mean, is an interesting one because I thought he always played really well for Tampa. So like any team that gets him, maybe for the playoffs,
Yeah,
usually put up a lot of points in playoffs. So
Risto, Gustav Nyquist, Ryan Lindgren, Trent Frederick, Pavel Bushnevich is an interesting one.
Buchnevich is interesting. I mean,
Yeah,
St. Louis like is a weird team because they just have a lot. Like it's almost like they're just kind of in the middle and don't really know what they want to be at this
they're not
point.
better than the Flyers. So,
No, they aren't. Yeah,
but they do need to get younger. Oliver Bjorkstrand,
Bjorkstrand.
yeah. Um, Colton Susie, Nate Robertson, John Gibson, who's been rumored for like ever. Jordan Kyrou. What? I didn't even notice he was on here.
I don't know.
That's not happening. Eric Carlson.
Who's gonna eat the salary there? Like, who's gonna take that cap?
I think a lot of teams would want him, but they can't fit him.
That's what I mean. Like, nobody's gonna take his salary.
Same
So
thing with
just
Seth Jones. It's
get
like,
out of luck.
yeah, you could trade Seth Jones for Eric Carlson.
There you go. That'd be hilarious.
Um, and Yoel Armia, who I definitely think could get moved and would be actually like kind of a perfect player to move at the trade deadline. Because
He's a good addition for like just some scoring help for teams.
right, exactly, and he's physical, and so there's just a bunch of names out there. I don't think the Flyers would be in on any of these unless it's Bowen Byram or Owen Power.
Yeah, only the younger
which
players make sense for them really here.
I mean, I would love to get Owen Power or Byram. It is interesting though because like what's his name's value is not very high right now, but Drysdale. But I do wonder if you could like, I know they wanted Bowen Byram at the time, so could you do like a Drysdale plus something that Boston or not Boston? I'm sorry, Buffalo wants. I don't know what it would be though. It's a tough one because we don't line up with that trade. Dylan Cousins obviously is a big one. People are just trying to rip apart teams. Brock Nelson should get traded, but he's probably not going to be because Lou Lamoriello is kind of crazy.
I mean, the
So,
Islanders just need to rebuild at this point, I would say. So they're a very old team.
Yeah, they're super old, and they don't seem to want to get younger. Like Noah Dobson was being rumored to be.
Yeah,
traded.
they're trading all the young, good players that they have to be like, yes, let's add this 37-year-old to our roster.
I wonder if like Matt Barzal is somebody that the Flyers could look at. They would never trade them to us, but like,
yeah, they're never going to trade.
that's the type of guy
that,
we need.
Oh, of course, but I just think you're going to have to look at different teams.
I wouldn't trade him if I was Islanders. All right. So I guess we're right at the end here, I just wanted to say that Jet Luchenko had 2 goals, 1 assist on Saturday night. He was a +3 as well.
Yeah,
Jones
maybe we'll
talked
see
about
him.
him.
Maybe we'll see him join the Flyers potentially to end.
Yeah, we have no idea what's going to go on with him because they are not making that the playoffs because I don't think that team is
Yeah, they're
good
terrible.
enough.
They're terrible.
So hopefully we get some kind of update on not just Luchenko but him and Alex Bump. I did listen to Anthony Gargano on PHLY. He had a good interview with Keith Jones, and they talked about Bump. And he said he does not expect Bump to finish out his like 4-year college career. So you can tell like they're trying to
We're
bring
gonna
him
try to
over.
sign him. Yeah.
Yeah. I would love to see Bump come over, and if you bring Bump over, where the hell is Jacob Peltier playing? This is kind of what I'm saying. Is like
They gotta move
they
up some
gotta
wingers.
they gotta do something. They
They
gotta
have
do something,
way too many wingers in
and
the
no
system.
centers.
Yeah, so like
Like the closest thing they have to a center
well,
prospect right now is Massimo Rizzo.
well, I was just gonna say that like they have so many wingers, no centers. Like writing is very much on the wall. What do you do there? Move the wingers for centers
They're also
potentially.
going to be drafting a lot of centers in this draft. That's what they're going to be
Yeah.
doing.
So anyways, we'll see what happens. It's going to be interesting. Like the trade deadline's obviously coming up in a couple weeks, and we will see what the
Wow,
Flyers
it's
do.
almost here.
Yeah, March
What's
7th. So
Oh my
that's
god.
Friday. Yeah.
Oh my
So
god.
we're
We got
pretty
2
close.
weeks. All right, that'll be a fun show.
Yeah, definitely.
That'll be an awesome show. Actually, I didn't realize it was so close. I thought it was. Yeah, it snuck up on me because of the foreign nations. So typically, it would be like around like next week, right? They pushed it back.
Yeah, usually it's like late
Yeah,
February. So it's Four Nations has it back a bit, but it's coming up, and we will see what
pushed it
happens as
back
what
1 week.
unfolds.
They
Yeah.
pushed it back 1 week.
So we'll see how it unfolds and kind of if anybody gets traded for the Flyers, right?
I think just looking at that, even that small trade we just saw with Ville Husso, I think there's going to be trades like before deadline. I think we've already seen.
Oh
that,
yeah,
right?
I mean that's just the precedent in the NHL these days. If you can get your business done early, teams typically try to do that, acclimate guys
Yes.
as quick as they can. So
Yeah.
we will see here.
All right, that's it for us. Anything you want to leave the audience with?
No, just we appreciate the listens and everybody tuning in. Like we've seen, our numbers really spike up the last couple weeks, last couple episodes, and we just want to say we appreciate that, and we'll be having you covered with content coming up here the rest of the season, also into the off season. Tons of articles as well on flyersnittygritty.com. So check those out, and the content will keep coming your way.
Yeah, thank you all so much. We love when our numbers are high. It makes us feel good. So thank you all. Truly appreciate all the support and the time that you guys give us and listen to us. It's awesome. And we'll try to keep delivering. Again, just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe to here at the YouTube channel. Also hit the notification bell for notifications when we release the episodes. For the audio version, there's Spotify and iTunes. Give us a rating and a follow there as you can. Again, if you made it this far, you haven't done that stuff so far, please do so. Though our subscription to view rate is like extremely high, but it's because we don't do that many views. But I'd love to get it like near 100%. It would be amazing. Also, shout out to our sponsors, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Go get yourself an awesome cheesesteak from Jim's. They have one of the best, if not the best, cheesesteak in Philadelphia. Also, shout out to Public Summit Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Go to them to help you facilitate the process between you and your insurance company. They'll make things easier for you and make sure you get the best rate you can. Public Summit Adjusters, 215-752-0560. And shout out to sportspider.com. They are an aggregator of sports content from all over the internet, cover more than just hockey, all the big sports. And also, all of our stuff is pinned at the top there. They are our partners. So if you support them, you support us. Thank you again for listening. We love you, everybody. And remember, always stay gritty.